Мы продолжаем. Сейчас выступит Иван.
So we continue. We are going to hear Ivan Chuvashov from Sigma, and he is going to tell us about the migration of the data from Oracle to PostgreSQL using Pentaho tool. Hello, everyone. In my talk, I would like to touch upon a very sensitive subject matter of migration, especially from Oracle to Postgres. And I would like to share my experience of how we migrated, and we are still migrating with one large project from one database to another database. But before we start talking about the migration itself, we need to understand why do we migrate. Why do we migrate data from Oracle to Postgres? I guess in some cases, so it is obvious, but anyhow, we need to talk about it. So the main thing, one of the most important things, is to reduce the costs to buy additional licenses for Oracle. For example, the project that we are working with the cost of the license is more than 60 million rubles per year, which is quite a substantial amount of money. And secondly, the point number two, which is also important, and our customer is state agencies, so it's an import substitution and the economic viability and so on and so forth. So sanctions introduced by other countries. And thirdly, which is more technical point, the substitution of technology. The project that we been working with, it's still using Oracle Forms. If any of you know, it's an outdated technology, obsolete technology. The application is using OEBS. If anyone faced this application, probably it still comes to you in your nightmares. And if we are coming back to Oracle Forms and OEBS, the situation there that we have, I don't know, some thick client or a backend that somehow has become a client of Oracle Forms, and OEBS and the database management system has all the business logic in it. And that's why the consumer face a lot of problems with the performance. For example, in OEBS, in this database, we found stored procedures that were written in 2002, 2003, and it was really branched out, a lot of business logic code inside this database. And if you get in there, if you try to read something, then the chance it's highly not likely that you're going to understand anything. And also using new technology, advantages of the new technology, and switching to simplified stack usage of IT architecture for the enterprise. The customer gave us a requirement for the migration. Some of these requirements are listed here. The migration should be incremental, partial, and complete. Well, complete is obvious that we need to migrate the whole database. At the same time, we can't transfer it just in similar way to make a copy of it. But when we migrate, when we rewrite the application for the new technology stack, of course, we are not using Oracle Forms anymore. We are using Java, thin client, and backend. So our complete migration is making some transformations, some modifications to the data. Incremental migration, that's when we are transferring certain amount of data for some period of time, for example, in a day. And if we understand that there were some mistakes during the migration process, so we did something wrong, then we need to transfer partially some data, some entities. The requirements for migration is we need to make the full migration in no more than 2 days in the weekend. And incremental migration should be done in 4 or 5 hours when the user is not working with the system. And as for the size of the database, as of now, In Oracle, it takes more than 10 TBs, or about 10 TBs. 90% of those are low documents, files, some related entities that are somehow stored at the Oracle itself and at some separate file storage or some document processing tool. The process of migration should be locked. We need to understand what we transferred, when we did it, and how much time did it take to transfer this data. The data that we transferred that were modified under the new system, they must be of higher priority in comparison with the data that we are transferring now. So if a user is entering the system, the new system, and changed, altered any data, it shouldn't be replaced, it shouldn't be deleted when we go on with the migration. The system must store old links to the previous system so that when we are trying to work out what happened or work out some processes that led to some errors or something like that, we need some data to analyze the situation to provide specific answers regarding any process that is taking place in the system. And one of the main aspects is the transformation logic. It should be stored not at the Oracle, not in the Postgres, neither nor. It should be somewhere in between. Why is that? Because when we migrate, we do not do it continuously. We are migrating at a certain moment when, well, we can say we are doing it in two stages when we are delivering the migrated version to our consumers. So we are not supposed to do it at any period of time. At a certain period of time, we should just switch off, and then we should just tell them that now we are working in Postgres, not in Oracle anymore. So we should know about this time. If we're talking about the tools that are available on the market, then we can divide them into 4 blocks. Extensions for Postgres that allow to connect to the database, Oracle database, so one point to another point, or for example, such as there are 2 popular examples that I can give you. That MBD, Oracle Migrator. The specific thing about these two, if we have migrated from one point to another, so if we were making a copy of the data, then we could have used these tools and we would just transfer the data. But since in our system we need to modify the data and we need to modify it, we need to change it somehow, we couldn't change the data either in Oracle or in Postgres, so that's why we couldn't use this tool. And from my experience, when we were using Oracle VDW, then sometimes we were losing connections, even something happened to the connection, if we lost the signal, and then we will have to restart the whole process from scratch. And another peculiar thing about this extension is that if we are making some complex queries using some joint data from Oracle, then we are getting this data, these tables externally, and then we're filtering it out. If we did it, if it was only one table, for example, and then this condition, this filtering, I guess we would have done it, the Oracle. But second block of software, these are external programs, such as Aura 2PG. I guess everyone is familiar with this one. Maybe few of you even used it. It's working great. It's working fine. It's a pretty large software that allows you to do it. So it copies the data from one database to another. But what we faced is that it didn't work with us. We didn't manage to migrate data when we just decided to copy data from Oracle to Postgres. We saw that it just didn't work. In our case, it was just running around our memory stack, and we had more than 600,000 objects in Oracle, so it just didn't manage to handle this amount. And the next block is ETL tools. Mostly these are two, not the best ones, but one of the most popular representatives is Pentaho Data Integration in Informatica ETL. We'll talk about those a little later in more detail. And the self-written program modules, we could have taken some Java application, we could have written it, and we could have used it for the migration. But then we would have faced some child diseases of ETL instruments, ETL tools, because the products that we used, they resolved it all. And if we would have written something ourselves, we would face all the same problems that these solutions have resolved. And we've chosen Pentaho Data Integration, keeping in mind the requirements that we got from the consumer. I wanted to show you a video here regarding the Pentaho data, but it's not working. Just a second. For example, that's how it's done. We can pause it in here. That's how the migration is happening. We are just adding some cubes to the worm. We're adding some arrows. We are allocating some process for each of the arrows, so we can divide Pentaho into components, into jobs, and into transformations that are changing the data itself. So here you can see, so we have started the transformation, we are running transformation, and real time we can see the amount of data that we've transferred. So how is it transferred, what is the speed of the transfer of the migration, detailed statistics, everything is described here in a lot of detail. It's a really convenient tool. If there is some error, then we can see it in the logs here, and we can understand what happened, what was changed, why this or that error did occur. We'll go back now. So as I said, we have this interim layer. So we are checking the data that we migrate, that we transfer, and we see that in our previous system in Oracle there is some corrupted data. Then we either clean it up, or we modify it, or we change the types, and so on and so forth. So anyhow, we clean up the data, we modify the data. Using the Pentaho components, we can group it in different ways and calculate sums, and we can put it into different tables or to aggregate them somehow. So we load it up and we log it. You saw it on the video at the bottom of the screen, all the changes that are happening. It can also be seen at the log, at the Postgres log, in the Postgres table, and we can analyze it for the future reference. So not about just the amount of data that we transferred, but also the speed of migration. And we can then evaluate, we can assess what we did. And we can roll back a little here in my report here, because if we talked about the preparation, about the reasons why do we migrate, but we didn't talk about the process when we started to develop these migrations. We encountered a zero stage, rolled back to the zero stage, because using the system that we wanted to use, we didn't have any documentation, and we faced a serious problem with the development and with the support of the previous system. And just an advice for the future: if you are planning to migrate, or you have already started doing some migration, then you should really get the documentation, or at least some contact information of the people, of the developers, because again, that's something obvious, that's something everyone knows, but we should say that, because we are not writing migrations ourselves. Mostly figuring out what to migrate takes more time than the migration itself. And it leads to a lot of problems with the consumers, with the clients, and within the team. as well, because quite often we migrate not what we need, and quite often we have to do the same job a number of times. So how and when we are doing this, so it's up to the client to give us the task, and I'm not even going to talk about this now. Okay, but we figured out, we transferred the necessary data, so it's all done, but there is also consumer will be really lacking trust, wouldn't trust us, so it will say, okay, you transferred the data, but what are the criteria to check the data? And we will say, okay, 1,000 lines was transferred, and the client would go, okay, so how does it help us? So at the moment we are facing this serious problem, how to compare the data that we've migrated. I will tell about it the next slides. So when we are transferring data, we have 2 full days, weekend days, for the full migration. Incremental migration is for 5 hours per night. So we have a primary key. If we talk about the migration itself, we remember the modification data, so that's how it looks like. What we did here is we organized a batch log, a batch that starts the commands, the jobs. That's the job from Pentaho. It forms the tasks, it copies data to some tables, and then it creates an external key. It gives the data that exists in Oracle. It remembers the date of modification, the job, when it took place, and the source of data, where it came from. So we can get not only from Oracle, but from some other external systems. For example, there is the document database there, and so we have some other sources for that. If we are facing some errors during the migration, we log them, and we can see these errors or warnings in a batch log. And after the migration is over, we can analyze these errors, and we can fix it if it's needed, or we can fix the transformations that were done. So what kind of warnings we might get? One of the not that serious warnings that we get a lot of times, for example, we didn't transfer some referral information, some reference information, but we took an entity that this information is referring to, but in our entities it's not obligatory information, and because of that we can put null in the fields. We can put warning there that sorry, we didn't transfer that data. After the migration, we can fix this data, we can update this data when we can transfer this reference data. So it's really helpful, and the migration is not failing, and we continue doing our job. But some logs, some things, then we just go back to that, and then we additionally could change the data that we need. So we just transfer additional data. How do we check data? How do we validate data? So it's a very sensitive subject matter. So we can only give numbers, but we can't really evaluate the quality. But we have figured out a method, in a way, an algorithm of how we can check the quality of the data. We are developing a certain function. At the same time, we are creating reports in our new system where we are migrating the data. We are creating this in Pentaho. We are creating a job that forms us reports about all the data. If these reports depends on dates or some other parameters, some other settings, it's up to us to choose what settings do we need, and then we start multiple reports both at Oracle and at Postgres. And if it's a small report, if it takes a lot of time to make this report, some reports takes about a day to create those, and then we are just taking a certain amount of data, not all of it. And after that, we are getting these 2 footprints, and then we compare it. And if we understand that during this process, when we understand that the data is really different, for example, structurally different, so the approach was totally different, then we are looking at our migration and we modify it. We're trying to understand why older application looks like this and the newer version looks like that, then we implement changes to the migration. So it's a self-evaluation to understand if we transfer the data in the right way. And that's for us the quality assessment. Then we can show these reports to our client. We can show them, so that's what you had in Oracle, that's what you have at Postgres, these reports generated into different systems. So that's in a way quality of data. Not all of the cases that we had, that client would accept this and would say, yes, I'm happy with that. That's the real information that we need. But the second approach that we have to assess the quality of the data migration is when the grids loaded, dumped in both systems, and then we compare almost line by line to see did we migrate everything in the right way or not. Just here, how do we track the errors if during the process of migration we saw that something went wrong, or rather after each start in the batch script we have a run command. We put there that after the job completed, we need to send a letter. Then we download the log, the stats, to see what data we transferred, how did we transfer it, so where did we run it all, what types of the data we run, and the status, was it transferred or not, and when was it transferred. And the second part of the letter, we can see more detailed stats, the amount of data and the amount of time it took. And of course, there is no silver bullet during the migration. We even with the same tool, with the Pentaho, we faced different peculiarities. In quotation marks. Some of them we haven't resolved yet. We haven't found a cure for yet. One of the problems that we faced is the strict typization of data. We have a problem that when we are taking a certain number from the Oracle, then it's stored in a different way. And in Pentaho we have int. And during the migration, we need to convert into a different format so that we could work it and store it and compare it in the right way. And if we don't need to transfer it, then not to transfer it. So we need to convert data additionally at the transformation level already. And then some lagging, even those things that we thought initially that the reason is that we didn't allocate enough memory, and then we need to give more memory. But even now we have this problem that Pentaho remembers certain preset parameters, and then again it causes it to lag or it just dies. But we are trying to find the silver bullet to cure this, to treat this. If the transfer is working slowly, the reason could be because the Oracle data is not transferred fast enough because the system is under workload. So there is an interesting component. It's called number of copies to start. We can change the I don't know how to put it, the number of components that is doing the same job, the same operation. And one general thing that would help you to solve, I don't know, that will help us a lot to migrate the data is using the general transformation, certain blocks of transformations that are used in multiple transformation. We just call them general, and then it's much easier to use them and to work with them. Thank you for your attention. Any questions? Thank you. Questions? Thank you for your report. The question is, the Postgres side, did you apply any modifications of the parameters to speed up the process of downloading the data, compression, some database parameters? You mean the Postgres configuration, or yes, Postgres configuration to speed up the migration process of the tables and so on? Yes, we were configuring it, but it's a standard things, standard settings. Shared buffer, we work mem, we increased these parameters, and I don't really think that it affected the migration a lot. The number of working processes, we increased that value, we made more of them. Any other questions? Thank you for your report. The question is, you said that 90% of the data were some documents, some content in the original table. Maybe you could just put this content storage to some external storage and then to transfer what's left. And in Postgres, it would be a problem to store this kind of data, and you just transferred it. Didn't you think about storing it externally? Yes, I will tell you more about that. We did a different thing with the documents. We only store links actually to the documents in the new system because we understand that Postgres wouldn't be able to handle such large document files. So we store documents themselves at the document processing system, and we only store links to this system that refer to these documents, and we only store metadata in the files, the size, the users, and so on. Well, this is it. Oh, one more question. Yes, hello. I don't know, maybe I didn't hear it. So, which version of Postgres and from which version of Oracle you are performing the Oracle 11? Oracle is 11.2 and Postgres version 11. And the data structure you are, yes, we are modifying the data structure using Pentaho, yes, to make it work with our structure. And does it support the convert process? No, it doesn't. And you don't use partition? We are using partition. We are not using it currently. We will use it, and it will be something like PGPathman or something like that. So for us, we are going to insert it into the other table. So you don't have large tables that are partitioned by data, for example, by date, for example. What would be the performance in Postgres if you don't have partition? Well, they're not that large, so at best they are about 3-4 million lines at Oracle. In tables, I mean. So that's what we migrate using Pentaho. It takes a few hours, 3-4 hours, but at the same time, we can. Yes, the transformation, we are creating job we sort it by date to make the migration faster, but we do not using this. Look at the scheme conversion too. It support the partition from when the migration done from Oracle to Postgres. So, okay, we're done. Thank you, Ivan.